Hello and welcome back to the Cortright cast. I'm Alex Cortright and I'm joined by my brother Jonathan Cortright, and today we have to talk about the elephant in the room. A few weeks ago, the Snyder Cut of Justice League finally hit HBO Max, and there's not really a better way to say this. I'm not sure why no one else seems to be saying this, but it's still really bad. Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah.
I've thought of ways to sugarcoat this. I've watched hundreds of YouTubers sugarcoat it. I've tried to figure out why everyone is dancing around the truth here, but the film is still just bad. You can give it all the slack that you want. You can address how it's better than the original Joss Whedon Justice League as much as you want. But in the end, if you actually take the scalpel to this film, it's a complete and total mess. And it seems relatively obvious. I mean, there are some major improvements over Joss Whedon's Justice League, but I think if Joss Whedon's Justice League was a 2, this movie's like a 3.5. Is that out of 10?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a massive improvement over Joss Whedon's Justice League, which it's unfair to call it Joss Whedon's Justice League, as Whedon's cut was reported to be like over 2.5 hours long, and it's really the Warner Brothers.
The Warner Brothers cut.
The Warner Brothers cut.
I wouldn't even pin. I know some people have been pinning the
which
failure
heavily
of that film
favored
on
Whedon's reshoots.
Yeah.
But it's a massive improvement over that. It isn't quite the train wreck that BVS was, but that's just because nobody's on the train. Like, it's not. It seems like nobody really cared to put much extra into it. You know, BVS was a failure largely because of how high it aimed. This is a failure and it aimed very low. You know, it's like, it's an improvement, just not that much.
Yeah. Well, what's so strange to me is that this movie came out, and I know a lot of people were excited for it. I mean, you have to know, Zack Snyder, I have to give him credit. He has built a large fan base of people that adore his movies. I would say, no offense intended, with blinders on. Just completely ignoring 90% of the faults among his movies. I even say that as someone who's really enjoyed some of his movies in the past. Yeah. Specifically, Watchmen and 300, I'm a big fan of. That being said, I feel like he has fallen from grace a bit, or at least stepped into some realms that he can't handle yet, as far as story goes. And just not performed to what I think he's capable of with his last few movies ever since like Man of Steel. However, there's been a weird trend of all the movie reviews coming out and all the YouTubers and critics across the world being incredibly reluctant to criticize this movie. Yeah. And we know this because we've also spoken poorly about Zack Snyder's work in the past and seen backlash from viewers as well. And it seems, we literally have even seen YouTubers claim that they know people that are afraid to criticize this new film because of the backlash that they will receive from the fans.
Yeah.
Like, this is an open thing, but I just don't feel like I can do that. Yeah. I consider, I'm like, should we even touch on this movie? But someone has to come out and say it. This film is incompetent from start to finish.
Like, I think it's important to say, like, it's cool that Snyder got to do this. It's cool that he finally got to have his movie made, because it's sort of taken away from him under, less than amicable circumstances, as we know now. You know, he had to step away from it because of an awful family tragedy. I feel like some of these do sort of contribute to people being nicer to it, and also the fact that they got to get out their hate for it when the original came out anyway. I feel like people are less interested in destroying it. I think it's cool that he got to do it. I think this is something that will remain in the conversation of movie making for years.
And change.
That's cool.
Change the landscape of what people can do.
Yeah.
And that being said,
I just wish it was a better movie for this to happen.
As a casual viewer, I was vaguely entertained for the whole movie. I mean, if you put the blinders on, I was vaguely entertained. I know that's like super lukewarm. But I can see how, he did make a better movie than Joss Whedon, which we've already addressed. But what I'm seeing from a lot of these other critics is that everyone it's not that the critics are raving about how great it is. They're just saying it's a lot better than the original. Like, they're just avoiding saying the hard truth of it. Everyone is like, well, this is better. This is a significant improvement over this thing that was in Whedon's cut, and it's just, I don't think it should be that way.
Yeah.
I really don't like the idea of everyone having to flee from Snyder fans.
Yeah.
But so jumping into the, I guess, comparison of Whedon's cut to Snyder's cut, which we've kind of covered a little bit, there are significant improvements across the board. Mostly to the story. You can see where things that didn't make sense at all in Whedon's cut, where you were just like, something was missing there, it's there now. However, I think there's a big debate to be had about whether it should have been there in the first place, or if the original construction that Snyder had of it was of any value.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, this movie was never going to be released as a 4-hour cut originally. Like, when people are like, oh, we finally got the Snyder cut that we should have gotten in theaters, it's like, this would never have been released in theaters.
Yeah.
This is quite clearly not what Warner Brothers would have allowed.
Yeah.
They would have chopped it down to at least 2.5 hours.
Which I don't think actually is a problem.
So if you say that, like, the movie has to be half of a workday to have it be coherent and make sense, that's an issue from the beginning, because the movie's not going to be 4 hours long. Right? They would have
not
cut
enough
it down
in this film. Like, this film, I don't want Warner Brothers to chop it up and make it their version of a studio film that's, you know, becomes a Frankenstein's monster of itself. That being said, 90% of what feels like is added content to this movie is just slow motion shots.
Yeah.
Like, there is a lot of new content in the film, but many of the scenes simply go on for an extra minute and a half of slow motion panning.
Right.
Awkwardly long. Not like a little bit long, like this is a stylistic thing, because I understand and I like that stylistic leaning among directors to have the awkwardly long shots. I enjoy Snyder's slow motion to an extent. But this film, right off the bat, within like 20 minutes, you've just watched like an eternity of slow motion shots.
The opening minute and a half is a long slow motion shot.
And that one's understandable.
That one is the most understandable. But it sets the tone for the whole movie.
By the time that like Aquaman is, after he talks to Bruce Wayne early on in the film and goes into the water, and then people sing for like a minute and a half, like over the water, and it goes on. It's not that there was a problem with the construction of the scene. It's that so many scenes like that compound on each other throughout the film to make incredibly long shots that just add minutes to the film. They don't improve the film. If this was a film that had just a great bare bones of story and character, I don't think I would complain about that. Like, I would be like, hey, it was a little long, but it was still really good. But there's nothing underneath the slow motion shots is the problem.
Runtime doesn't equal character development. Like, yeah, we get more scenes with Cyborg, and we get more scenes with Flash, and we get more scenes with Aquaman. But they really don't get us anywhere. Like, knowing Cyborg's backstory really didn't make his story in the movie work to me. It was very basic and very so like, here's his backstory, and he's kind of just an angsty jerk for most of the movie. It's like, it didn't make it like, oh, I care so much about Cyborg. It's like, you know. Well,
I actually thought they did a significantly better job of developing Cyborg, but I think that points to the larger problem of the actual character portrayals throughout the film, because Cyborg himself is developed, I think, way better. I'm not saying it's perfect. I don't think you should be trying to develop characters with their introductions in the first team up film to begin with. Well, I think that's a massive mistake.
If they're going to do that, what they had to do is they had to have the other characters in the Justice League add to his story. They had to have them contrast it in some way or bring something out of him, but they don't, and it doesn't. It feels like a parallel story that's going along with this much bigger story. And they never converge in a way that's satisfying. It's just kind of like, that's there, and that should have been in his own movie, but it's thrown into this one.
Yeah, I acknowledge that it's better and that there is more to it. It does feel like half the movie is just his own movie of his parallel story. But what really makes it not come together for me is the character portrayals themselves. Like you said, he kind of just still ends up being an angsty jerk for half the movie, and there's no real life or there's nothing charming about the character. And I feel that way about pretty much.
I think Ray Fisher works very hard to make it work. Like, I think this is like his first movie. I think he's a really talented actor.
I liked him, but something feels off about the character portrayal.
He really didn't have much to work with.
Yeah.
And Flash didn't seem to have a story at all. He just kind of had random scenes.
He just got like the one scene
he saves the girl that, like, in his own movie would become his girlfriend.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, that's a significant comic
Yeah.
book character. She's never going to appear again.
Yeah, and that's what's frustrating too, because I mean that's another problem that we're going to talk about later. Is that entire scene was like 10 minutes of slow motion,
Yeah.
and it was a cool scene. I thought it was a relatively cool scene. The Flash's character is really annoying. I think it's a really poor
Yeah,
portrayal
he just sort of like
from a
talks
good
the way
actor.
I feel like boomers think, like millennials talk, or like Gen Z people talk.
Yeah, it's a real
It's so
caricature
awkward.
character. But the actual scene itself was relatively entertaining. But when it's over, you're like, oh, that didn't add anything to the
Oh,
movie.
I see
It was just
exactly
a
why that was
nod.
cut from the.
Yeah, it's like I see exactly why that was cut. Was it kind of like, oh, nice, that does add a little bit more depth to his character, but if it's not pursued, is it real depth or is it just fan service? Is it just a nod?
Well, it was thrown
and at
in
what
there
point
to show,
are
like-
nods an actual good thing? Like, I'm tired of every single superhero film, every single franchise just being like, the entire movie is not good filmmaking, it's just nods. Hey, by the way, don't you know this thing? You know Flash, he has a girlfriend. This is her. She's here. She's not going to appear in the film again. Never going to be mentioned. Going to explain zero motivation for the character. Add nothing to his backstory other than people who know the comic or the TV shows know it. And then she's gone. And so what
Well, like
use
what
was
was
that
the purpose
scene
of that
to the film?
scene? It was like to
It was
introduce
just to give him more
Flash,
screen time.
and also to show like, oh, he's looking for a job. He's going to find a job later in the movie off screen. Like, it's not like that was it's not like there was some like parallel plot where it was like, oh, Flash really wants to get this job. He finds a job at the end of the movie off screen, and it's just said.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not like you could say that there was much of a point to that or a setup or a payoff to any of it. It was just there.
Yeah.
And I see exactly why that was cut from the theatrical.
And it's not that it didn't have a good idea. I mean, it was just that the execution was not there. I mean, I understand they were trying to develop Flash. They were trying to set up a story, but it's just not there. And that's how I feel about a lot of the film. It's so blatant that they're doing so much better than the Whedon cut, in that they're really trying to develop some characters and trying to build some stories, but they still fall flat. And I think that's my biggest problem, is that we can applaud the fact that they tried harder, but they got 4 hours of screen time and gained an extra mile. They didn't finish the marathon. And that's just from a, plot and character standpoint. We haven't even gotten into the action set pieces, the character portrayals of like Batman and Superman, which I think are I think Batman's portrayal, while I enjoy Ben Affleck, I like his aesthetic, I don't think he puts any amount of life into the character.
Well, I think there was so much backlash to Batman's character in BVS, which is understandable, that their solution to it was kind of almost to write him out of the movie in a weird way. Even though he's there for most of the movie, he kind of adds very little to it. Aside from, like, yeah, he does things, but he's like he's kind of just present in scenes.
Yeah.
Like, you don't feel like Batman is even the same
I don't feel his
character from the
authority
last
at all
movie
as a character.
He like fought with Superman for like 2.5 seconds before he died, like what, 10 minutes after he was about to murder him. And then he's like, oh, well, I really need to avenge this guy.
Yeah.
I really,
And I understand the guilt that they're trying to imply that he feels for
but
Superman's death.
they didn't do that. Like, if they had spent some of the 4 hours like digging into that and really like showed why he feels so guilty for it and built that in the first like hour of the movie, that could have worked, but they kind of just graze over it and are like, yeah, they're friends now.
Yeah, and I hate to compare, I don't want to make a direct comparison to Marvel, but I think that the baseline problem of the plot of this movie, it doesn't fix everything, but the main problem is that they're trying to introduce 2 new characters while carrying an incredibly heavy storyline among Batman and Superman, and then all the surrounding villains and fan service that they're trying to stuff in, and you just can't do that. I mean, when you make a team-up movie, you need your characters to be established, and I mean, Wonder Woman has like nothing to do in the entire movie. She just shows up for scenes and looks kind of cool.
Oh god, that music that they play every time.
Yeah, they randomly insert the exact same music every single time she comes on screen, even if it's completely dissonant
they did it
with the rest
so much
of the soundtrack.
it just became comical.
But yeah, like, not to derail that thought.
Sorry.
This movie, you could have gone in different directions, so it doesn't have to be this direction. But a base level of direction that they could have gone was to really just focus in on Ben Affleck's struggle with the loss of Superman. Now, I'm not saying it would have been the most sincere, because Batman v Superman did not execute that well. But to come back in and build it around that, I mean, you could say that they tried to, they started to, because they show you some scenes where Batman's like, I feel guilty, but they really don't give him enough time. There's 4 hours and Batman feels hollow. It feels hollow and like nothing happens with him. Same thing for Superman. Superman comes back, they bring him back and nothing happens. Does he even have a conversation with Batman? The entire film?
The end when like Batman buys his house back.
The end. Yeah. So they revive him. He has a whole he has an hour of soul searching where he's going back to his old house and talking to Lois Lane and then coming back in a giant fight scene, but he has no character development at all. So even with the whole, which that's a whole nother subject, getting into the revival.
Yeah. But look, we need to talk. Are we ready to talk about the revival?
Yeah, go ahead and talk about the revival.
Let's go ahead and talk about the revival. This is the worst part of the entire movie. Like, it was the worst part of the Whedon cut. It's the worst part of this cut. And it's not a whole lot different in this cut. Yeah. I remember seeing the Whedon cut and, like, with the weird, like, CGI mustache stuff, I started thinking, I was like, man, I wonder if Superman was even supposed to come back that way. Like, I wonder if they just reshot all Superman's bits. And they kind of did. But he still comes back the same way.
He still comes back the same way. It's just a little bit different action.
Yeah, well, specifically the end of the movie, they clearly reshot all of Superman's stuff. But the bit where he comes back is like one of the laziest, awkwardly handled scenes ever. Like he just comes out and goes like, "I don't know who I am. Guess it's time to kill some people." Like it makes no sense. It's like. Why is he trying to kill them all? They're basically like, oh, he doesn't know who he is. It's like, so Superman's just automatically evil. Superman is just automatically like, I don't know what's going on. Time to give everybody laser eyes. Cyborg out of nowhere is just like, oh no, my auto defense system, it senses danger. I can't control it.
Yeah.
There's going to be danger throughout the whole rest of the movie, and this never pops up. This feels like something that should have been set up earlier in the movie.
It's just every single
and this
piece
would
of
have
the
been
scene.
like tension, like, oh no, Cyborg's auto defense system's about to go off. But it's just out of nowhere, like, I have an auto defense system that only pops up in this one
They're
scene.
laying the brick as they're walking the path.
Yeah. They're like, because we really need him to fight the Justice League for 2.5 seconds.
And that actually points to the fact that this is not the way that Superman should have been handled. The death of Superman into Justice League is that they needed to play a long game. And this is the downfall of Warner Brothers, of the Justice League, this entire Snyderverse or DC Cinematic Universe, is that they are not willing to play the long game. They are not willing to build anything. They are not willing. Would the death of Superman as a 3-part movie or a 3-movie trilogy that ends with him coming back to good, like it starting going bad, movie 2 being him being bad, movie 3 being him coming back to good, would that be an incredibly rewarding trilogy? Probably so. Mm-hmm. But they're like, we'll kill him in 5 minutes of the last movie and then bring him back within 2 hours.
Yeah.
And there's going to be no repercussions, no sense of what's this character actually is or what he's going through. I don't feel like Superman went through anything in this film.
Yeah.
He was just like in stasis. We all know he's coming back. There's no emotional weight. We know he's coming back. We know that he just comes back, fights them for 5 minutes. No real plot point, changes his mind. He sees his old girlfriend and goes, "Oh, I'm good again." Then just dips out on the Justice League for like 20 minutes for no reason while they're like struggling to fight. And then shows up in the end to prove that he never needed them in the first place. Yeah. That he could have handled all this on his own.
Also, like, he just comes back and the coolest action scene they could think of is he just punches Steppenwolf really hard several times.
Yeah.
They're just like, Superman's going to come back.
I've seen some people happy about his new entrance where he like shows up and catches Steppenwolf's like axe on his shoulder. Yeah. And I'm not going to lie, it just looks silly to me. I understand like the line he delivers is fine. But like him just showing up, like it looks like bad CGI. He teleports there, and there's an axe that's against like a steel shoulder. Like the whole, I get that Superman's indestructible, but the way they show it was like, so I understand cartoon, like this is a comic, but it was not a.
In the Whedon cut, they went so like cartoonish with Superman's entrance that it was just so much. It was so much more entertaining. Like when he like flies up and like. He says like the worst line in the whole movie. He's like, I believe in truth, but I'm also a big fan of justice. And then he just like punches Steppenwolf away.
Am I wrong in thinking that almost works because it's so bad?
It does. Like, it's so cheesy. It's so bad that like
It's so
so much more
It's
entertaining.
so comic book Superman.
Yeah, and then in this one, he just like flies up and is like, "I'm not impressed," and then punches Steppenwolf like 7 times, and is like, "See, all you guys needed was me."
Yeah, and then the entire rest of the sequence is just let's all punch him repeatedly, tossing. Like it was I did think it was a visually stimulating scene. It was vaguely
Superman
cool
has like
looking.
25 different powers, and you're just like, but he's gonna punch him a lot. He's gonna punch him
But that's
into
what
a wall.
everyone did. How many times did Aquaman utilize water in the entire 4 hours of the film?
No, but apparently he can defy gravity.
Yeah.
So what's his need for water? But it's just like I'm sick of the Snyder action scene where it's like he's gonna punch him, the guy's gonna fly into a wall, then he's gonna fly up to that wall, then he's gonna punch him through the wall.
Yeah.
Then he's gonna land in another wall.
It
then
does
he's
look
gonna
cool
fly to
the
the
first
other
time.
wall.
I like it the first time.
like-
Don't get me wrong. I like it when it feels like you're playing Injustice for 5 minutes of a
Yeah,
film.
but the thing
not
is, like,
every single time
the
he
action
appears.
scenes have no weight physically or emotionally, because for one, you don't care about the characters, and for two, the physics of Snyder's action don't
They go
exist.
too far. They just go too far. I like
A lot of the CGI looks really rubbery.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like Flash is kind of useless because every character in a Snyder movie moves at the speed of light. So, like, the only reason Flash is different is because you get to see it in slow
I think
motion.
that's the problem. The entire Justice League has no dynamic.
There's
Superman shows
also
up.
no clearly defined powers. Like, it's like Wonder Woman has a sword and she also punches people really hard, and she also moves really fast.
Yeah.
And it's like Aquaman also like kind of defies gravity, has a trident, and he punches hard and moves really fast too. And it's like Batman, well, he's just useless and he has a tank.
He has a gun
It's
that he
like
shoots like
Flash.
once.
Flash runs really fast, and also he's kind of overpowered because he can turn back time. But we're gonna counteract that by having him kind of just trip randomly. It's like there's no like they don't clearly define the powers in a way to where like this is how they're gonna have to. This is where it's gonna cause a
They don't
problem. This
link
is
to
where they're
each
gonna
other
have
either.
to overcome it. It's like Flash moves at the speed of light, and they're like, okay, we're gonna need you to run as fast as possible so you can turn back time. And he's running as fast as possible. And this whole movie, we see like very like Quicksilver looking scenes where like everything's moving in slow motion,
Yeah.
and he's like he can just touch things and do whatever. And then we're supposed to believe that the reason that like they almost fail is because he gets shot while he's moving faster than the speed of light. And what's funny is the shot where the bit where he gets shot, they don't show it in slow motion because it would have looked ridiculous. Because the whole
Yeah.
movie, they show how he can just like move things away, and then it's like, oh, I guess that bullet came really, really fast.
Yeah.
It's like the way that they define the powers and the way that they like cause problems for these overpowered individuals is not believable, and it's not compelling in any way.
And I think that's both a power and character problem in that the powers don't complement each other, they overlap each other. And
Yeah.
the same thing goes for the character dynamics on a personal level. None of the characters fit together or complement each other in any way. They try a few times. They try to have a scene where Cyborg and Flash or Aquaman like joke around with each other, but it always falls flat. It always hits the wrong note. When Flash is like, "Oh, do you think Wonder Woman would go out with me?" It's not funny. Not one single line that the Flash throws out in the film is funny. And every single line he has goes against the tone of Snyder's version of the Justice League, to a point where it literally feels like a Marvel character has been inserted into the Justice League. And I get it. I don't think that they need to be super serious all the time. But when you set this tone and then you throw in a character that is so dissonant with that tone, and then the dissonance doesn't sound good. Like, obviously, because it's dissonant. But like it's not like a character that feels like a breath of fresh air. It's just really
it's
annoying.
like-
It feels like what you said. It sounds like a boomer was like, "Oh, kids will like this." It doesn't sound like it's like, "Oh, kids wrote this and like this."
Yeah.
It's like someone was like, People love the laughs. Give them some of them Iron Man zingers, Flash. And then they had like an intern writer who's
I
like,
actually thought
I got some ideas for you, man.
I thought that the majority of Flash's jokes were from Whedon, or were from Whedon's cut.
They feel like they
and
are.
a lot
Every
of
single
a lot
joke
of
that
the
he-
extra ones are, but there were still a lot that I thought that when I saw the theatrical cut, I thought were Whedon's, and they're in the Snyder cut.
I was surprised that they kept so much of Flash's tone from Whedon in this one.
And actually,
I think it was a massive mistake.
there were only like one or two jokes in the original one that worked for Flash, and both of them were Whedon's.
Yeah.
Pretty much all of them
Well, 'cause
fall
Whedon
flat here.
does comedy decently.
Yeah. Well, also, this movie did highlight how or why you would hire somebody like Joss Whedon to come in and fix an overlong, highly expository movie.
Mhm.
And it's because Whedon, similar to somebody like Abrams or like Christopher McQuarrie are really good at making blockbusters where they condense highly expository dialogue into little digestible bits that still like it's a lot of like made up, mumbling of things that don't actually exist, trying to explain a plot that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
But Snyder's, they play it so straight and so serious, and it's so much longer that it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Like you're standing around watching these characters talk about things that are made up and don't make any sense within the universe. And you're just kind of like, sure, I guess they got to go do these things.
Yeah.
Sure, I guess that's why this is going. Like Whedon clearly like cut down or condensed the exposition, and in Snyder's it's like just free flowing.
Well, I think there's a medium between them. I think that Whedon cut too much to the point where the movie didn't make sense.
Yeah.
The movie still doesn't make a ton of sense, but I at least understand where they were coming from more. Like they actually did explain things a little bit better. I thought the mother boxes were explained a little better with like 30 minutes of exposition over, like narration over fight scene or other like references to other places in the universe or Darkseid. But I mean, we haven't even gotten into the meat of things here, where there were specifically, I think, 3 things that are very grounded in the DC universe that they're trying to fan service that were bombed in every way, in my opinion, which were Martian Manhunter, the 30 minutes after the movie is essentially over of absolutely useless, horribly shot, horribly performed, horribly written scenes. And then I think the insanely overwhelming emphasis on Darkseid contrasted with his uselessness to the film.
Remember how like everybody was like, Steppenwolf is like such an underdeveloped villain. He's just kind of like evil because he's evil and like he's not interesting and then in this movie in the Snyder cut they're like, oh, we're gonna give him a little bit of characterization. Now he's basically just like a abused puppy who's like really wants to prove to Darkseid that he can do his job. And it's like, well, what's Darkseid? Well, he's just an evil guy who's evil to be evil and he wants to take over worlds. It's like you just transferred Steppenwolf's problem to Darkseid, but we're supposed to think Darkseid's cooler because he looks cooler and he's a big character from the comics.
Yeah.
Like it's an entire reliance on like, hey, it's DC's Thanos.
Yeah. But then specifically with the execution of how they implemented him into the movie, it was okay if they were trying to be like, he's coming later in the series, but they needed to be a little more subtle about it. The fact that they just kept screaming his name every 5 minutes in the movie and showing him and making it feel, what they did to me was they made me feel like he was about to appear in the movie because they were emphasizing him so much. They weren't hinting at, future things to come. It wasn't a cameo. It was literally like Darkseid is the villain of this movie. They made it feel like Darkseid was the main villain of the film. And then they both didn't give him anything to do in the film. But they kept showing him, if that makes sense. Like they showed him every 5 seconds, but he wasn't doing anything.
Also, like what is up with like the whole thread of the movie is that like Steppenwolf can just warp to where these boxes are at as long as he kind of knows where they're at.
Yeah,
they were just like at one point when Superman is revived, the mother box goes like flying onto the police car.
Yeah,
and then they're just like, oh no,
and then he just shows
he's gonna
up.
come.
He just teleports.
He's gonna come. It's like what? It's like
it was used
because they were like when you use it, like calls him to. It's just like he's just waiting for it. He's like, they're using it now. Let's just warp to it. It's like, okay. It's like this feels like the laziest plot ever.
Yeah. Every single thing that justifies an action in the movie feels like they're laying the bricks while they're walking the path.
Yeah, and but that's the thing is that like, plots to blockbusters are often very lazy and often don't really make any sense when you think about it. But like that stuff can be forgiven if the dynamic between these characters is strong enough that you're engaged while watching it. But like every time they get into a fight, it's the most generic, like not today, Steppenwolf dialogue.
Yeah, and
it's like at least somebody like Whedon or Abrams or like people who are good at making these like character dynamics during action scenes. They do a good job of like not just constantly barraging you with like you won't win this time, Steppenwolf dialogue. They like make it a little cleaner. There's more dynamic between the characters and the scenes. And when they deliver the like not today, Steppenwolf. There's a certain level of self-awareness that makes it tolerable.
Yeah.
But Snyder's is like, they play it so straight and so like dark and serious that like it's just eye roll inducing.
Yeah. And I think that's a problem. The general, what you touched on with character dynamics, specifically in the action scenes, I think that's what makes a lot of the action feel hollow, is that there is no personal beats to any of the action. There is a vague storyline that is unfolding in the action scenes, but the interaction between characters just isn't there. And when it is, it's incredibly hollow.
There's also kind of like an anything goes attitude to the action scenes. Like when they're in the harbor, and then like, I don't even remember how like Steppenwolf like blows up the side of the wall or whatever, and then Aquaman swims in like he was just treading water outside waiting. It's like, was he on his way the whole time? Because he can kind of like just fly through water.
Yeah.
Or was he literally just sitting there waiting for the wall to burst open? It's like, and the fact that I'm thinking about that stuff is what's the real problem with the movie. Because plenty of silly things happen in movies all the time. And if you're engaged, you don't notice. That's the issue, is that I'm sitting there thinking about that. I'm going, wait, was he just treading water on the other side? I'm not going like, oh, cool, Aquaman's here.
Yeah.
Like, that's the movie's fault. Yeah. It's not engaging me. And if it was engaging me, if there was dynamic between them, if there was any tension between them that made it worth watching, I wouldn't be thinking about like, why did he just appear out of nowhere?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be thinking about like, hey, why did Flash just get shot when we're showing how slow everything's moving for him?
Yeah.
Like, these are things I shouldn't notice, but I notice because the movie isn't there for me. It's not pulling me in.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, across the movie as a whole, and we haven't even gotten to the epilogue yet. The movie as a whole just, it tries really hard to be better, and it is better, but it still falls flat in so many areas that were evident in the actual scenes that were shot, the story that was written years ago. I mean, it's just like Snyder can finish this cut and make it 4 hours long and put every scene that he ever shot into it, but you can't save this film from what was shot. Whedon could not have made this a great film. Is that okay to say? Mm-hmm. Like, Whedon did what he did, and I don't think he did a great job of it, but I don't know that there was ever a path to success for him. Because what he had, I could not imagine what it was like to be him, sitting in the cutting room floor, knowing the weight of what he's been given, and having this to work with.
Yeah.
Like, having the vision of someone who is so completely different from you, so flawed.
Every change was studio mandated, too. Like, the idea that, like, Whedon came in and was just like, you know what I want to do? I really want to do like all these things to the story.
Yeah.
Like the idea that they were just like, Whedon, what do you think would make this a better movie? And he's
like
how about if we make it like a two-headed hybrid of like a completely different movie and then something I want to do? Like, these were clearly studio mandated reshoots. These were clearly studio mandated rewrites.
He was given a checklist and he tried to check them off the list.
And that, I don't know. It was kind of a doomed project from the start. At a terrible launching pad of it was Batman versus Superman.
Yeah.
It was like, it was very bad for 3.5 hours, and then we reached the last 30 minutes, and I was just done with it.
I honestly think that if they had not filmed or shown the last 30 minutes of the film, it would have gotten it an extra point to a 1.5 on my scale of like 1 to 10. If I was ranking this movie out of between 1 and 10, I'd probably give it like a 3, maybe 3.5. I might could have given it like a 4.5 or 5 without this epilogue, because we've judged the film so far based on everything up until then. We have not talked about the 30-minute epilogue, the Martian Manhunter cameos, or really even touched on the eye roll inducing fan service that is littering the film. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, how fan service has gotten out of control in all superhero films and anything franchise related, really. I mean, it plagues all the superhero, all the Marvel stuff, all the Star Wars stuff. This is the world we live in, but I'm not going to accept it because you need to do better than that. You would think fan service would be getting better over the years.
At a certain
people
point,
would be getting better at figuring out how to implement these things. It's not that we don't want Easter eggs. It's not that we don't want nods to the fans. It's that this is nauseating.
At a certain point, it stops feeling like filmmaking just in general. Like the last 30 minutes of this movie didn't feel like the last 30 minutes of this movie. It felt like I don't even know what it felt like.
It looked like a YouTube fan film that was stitched onto, like the film was finished, exported, and then literally an amateur YouTuber put his fan film at the end.
Yeah, it's like what are we doing now? Like this movie's 4 hours long. It doesn't need to be. And also, why are we tacking 30 minutes onto this for fan service?
30 minutes that is largely given to an incredibly awkward, awful looking scene, awfully acted scene, and one of the worst dialogue scripts I've ever seen. I mean, the scene where Batman shows up, they're on like this desolate wasteland, all these new weird characters or characters that are side characters are showing up. They're trying to imply that a bunch of people are dead or gone or captured or whatever. They're trying to go up against Superman, Dark Superman, whatever. I get it. They're trying to be like, hey, look, it's the comics. But it doesn't work at all. And I was willing to live with it until the Joker shows up. And I say this as someone who really wants to see Jared Leto succeed.
Oh, hey, there's a longer version of the scene with more Joker.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm. I haven't watched it because why would I do that to myself?
But like they just put out a longer scene?
I'm pretty sure there's a longer version of it. I swear I saw that.
Okay. Well,
anyway.
Disregarding that, because that sounds horrible, I want to see Jared Leto succeed. I know there are a lot of people who don't like Jared Leto. I followed the man since he was in, just a singer in a band. Yeah. I enjoy a lot of his films and a lot of his performances. I do not think that his portrayal of the Joker is a good one. I specifically have not thought that the visual aesthetic of the Joker that they gave him was a good one. And I think that he hasn't had a lot to work with. I think he could do a good Joker. He has yet to prove that to me, though. He has yet to prove that he will do a good Joker. I do think he has it in him.
I think he's a good actor. I think his version of the Joker is one of the most embarrassingly bad portrayals of a villain I've ever seen in a comic book movie.
I would not go that far. That is where we disagree, but I understand what you're saying.
No, the scenes in Suicide Squad.
Of polarizing.
And this scene specifically
I think he
proved me.
I think he botched it in Suicide Squad, and in this scene, I was waiting for his redemption because they kind of played it like that was what it was going to be. They changed his face, they changed his hair. They tried to kind of,
but he basically played it the same way,
and playing it the same way, it didn't come across any better. But to take the focus off of Jared Leto, it wasn't just that Jared Leto had a poor performance in this scene. It's like a 5-minute dialogue scene of some of the stiffest, most awkward lines delivered heartlessly from Ben Affleck for like 5 minutes straight. And it goes on too long. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it was written by a 14-year-old fanboy.
Sounds like it was written directly by Zack Snyder.
Well, I wasn't trying to be. I was being aggressive, but
I mean,
I wasn't.
You said 14-year-old fanboy, and I just like
you just saw Zack Snyder in your head. Yeah, I mean, I've tried so hard. I've tried so hard to defend this stuff, but it's getting to a point where you can't.
Yeah,
that dialogue scene wrapped the movie up for me. The dialogue scene between Joker and Batman at the end of there was a point where they literally were just like trying to throw in. It was almost like how YouTubers will drop as many keywords as they can into their scripts for like SEO purposes. It felt like that was what they were doing for comic book fans. They were just dropping as many words that were like popular trending keywords among the comics that they possibly could to impress as many fans as possible. Like randomly mentioning like Harley Quinn and Robin and all this stuff. And mentioning scenes and plot points that have no weight to the story that we've been given so far. Yeah. They only have weight in some comic book universe that the majority of people watching this probably haven't read.
Well, also like the core issue with or one of the core issues with this interpretation of Batman and this interpretation of the Joker, aside from them just being flat out bad from the get-go, is that Batman has like killed quite heartlessly throughout the two movies that he was in. And the idea that Joker is still living is just bizarre.
Well, isn't
because that's always been like the whole like, oh, they're two sides of the same coin thing. Is like he won't kill him,
yeah.
And Joker's trying to push him to the point where he will kill him.
But we blew that out of the water in Batman v Superman.
And in Batman v Superman, he's kind of just running over people with his car left and right. But he's like, I'm not gonna kill this guy yet.
Yeah.
Or like Joker's just so hard to kill, or like no, it's like
he killed Robin. Wasn't that the implication?
Yeah. No, they like flat out said that he killed Robin, and it's like this destroys that dynamic on every level.
I want to call that scene just the dialogue. I want to call it a jumbled mess, but I'm trying to think of a stronger way to put it, because it's worse than that. I think it's worse than that. I think that scene was an embarrassment to Warner Brothers.
It got worse because then like Superman lands and he's in like his red and blue outfit for some reason, which is weird because like black Superman's always been associated with like evil Superman, but black Superman's good Superman in this movie, and then he comes back in his red and blue suit. It's just weird. But he like drops down and then it just cuts to black like it's like it was like a teaser for the next movie, and then it's like Ben Affleck wakes up.
Yeah.
And then just walks outside and Martian Manhunter floats down and says, "Hey, I'm around for the sequels." God. And then flies off and Ben Affleck's like, "Cool, I'm going to go back to sleep now."
Okay, Martian Manhunter.
Let's preface this with the fact that it was originally Green Lantern. I think this is somewhat important because Ben Affleck's reaction to seeing an alien fly down is a whole lot different from his reaction to Superman being an alien in Batman vs. Superman, where he was like, if there's even a 1% chance he's evil, we have to take it as a 100% certainty.
Yeah.
Very smart guy, Batman. And then this like green alien flies down and he's like, "Hey man, yeah, join the team, guy." It's like so out of character. Yeah. So the fact that it was originally supposed to be like kind of a human that still would have been bizarre. But the fact that it was supposed to originally be a human maybe makes it a little bit better. But yes, it was originally going to be Green Lantern. And I think Warner Brothers said, "Don't do that." Like they had already shot it, but Warner Brothers was like, "No, because we don't know what we want to do with Green Lantern yet. Mm-hmm. So don't like ruin it for us." So they switched it to Martian Manhunter. And the entire dialogue in that scene is horrific. Ben Affleck looks like he like just walked out of rehab or something.
Yeah,
and is like barely awake. Ben Affleck.
He looks like he's CGI'd. His entire body is CGI'd.
Yeah, and
like the entire movie, he's this like kind of bloated alcoholic looking, which was the truth. I mean, like no offense, like that was kind of the truth.
Let's talk about Martian Manhunter's earlier scene first. We forgot to address this. So the scene where Superman's mom is talking to Amy Adams and they're having like a little heart to heart.
Yeah,
they know all these like personal things about each other and they're talking like normal people, and then they walk out, or Superman's mom walks out, and then just like shapeshifts into Martian Manhunter.
Then shapeshifts back.
Then
character?
Shapeshifts into the Colonel. I think it's the Colonel.
Yeah.
Whatever, the military guy from Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. So the whole implication is that guy was Martian Manhunter the whole time, which makes no sense when taking in the prior movies. But also just makes no sense in the context of the scene.
Makes no sense. There's no way you cannot draw a path to make any of that scene make sense.
Also, like, what an awkward introduction. You just walk out and go like, "All right, back to my other form."
Yeah.
Oh, wait, then back to my other form.
Well, also because the actual scene was self-indulgent to begin with. The scene between Superman's mom and Lois Lane.
Yeah, but I don't think that was a bad scene because Amy Adams had very, very little in the movie.
Yeah, I don't think it's
so
a
like
bad
that
scene,
being in there was
kind of
important.
Self-indulgent scene.
Yeah,
to the plot of the movie. So then to take all of the emotional weight out of the scene by being like, "Oh, and this is a random person," and now it doesn't make any sense, that conversation they just had. This is a random alien.
And also we're kind of implying that Martian Manhunter's just around while all this is going on.
Yeah.
And is going to wait until all of it's Martian over Manhunter to offer his services.
Straight chilling for 3 movies.
Yeah.
And then he waits until Steppenwolf like almost destroys the world.
Yeah. So think about it. Like Martian Manhunter, like that guy, that military guy was like very present in Man of Steel. Like he's in like most of the movie. And he's just like chilling there being like, I guess they're just sort of going to level Metropolis. And I'm just going to watch because my cover is very important right now. And then in Batman vs. Superman, same thing. He's just chilling. And then in this movie, he's like, I'm kind of going to do things.
Not really, though.
But not really.
Not really.
But I'm kind of going to be there.
I'm just going to peek my head in and say, hello.
And then after they save the world, I'm going to pop up and say, hey, maybe next time I'll help you guys out.
Yeah. And isn't Martian Manhunter like super powerful too?
Yeah.
Like insanely powerful?
Yeah.
And the implication is that he just watched everything happen and was like, they look like they could use a hand. Oh, they got it. It's fine.
Yeah, they got it.
It's fine.
Maybe
I'll go back to bed. I'll drop by Batman's house later and just let him know, hey, I'm here. Just let a brother know if you need some help.
Yeah, like I mean,
and
yeah,
also
you
in the
guys
most
seem to have
awkward way
everything
possible.
You guys seem to have everything under control, but if you don't,
the dialogue in that scene between Ben Affleck and Martian Manhunter was it worse than the Joker Batman scene?
it's on the same level. It's clear that they were written at the same time.
Like, what in the world was that? Like, what did he say? I've been called by many names.
Yeah. Ben Affleck was like, he was like, who are you? And he's just like, I'm known by many names. He's like, so I'm not going to give you any of them. And then they continue talking for a little bit. And then like when he flies away, he's like, oh, one of them is a Martian Manhunter. And he just flies off. And Ben Affleck's just like, all right, I'm going to go back to sleep.
Yeah, he just like shakes his head and turns around.
Like how casually Ben Affleck handles that scene is like, God, it's one of the worst performances I've seen in recent memory. But he's just like, all right.
I'm still baffled.
Back to my nightmare.
I'm still baffled by how good Ben Affleck looks in that scene. He doesn't look like a real person.
Zack Snyder's like a really buff guy. So like, I mean, I think he's a lot shorter than Ben Affleck, but it would make me laugh if they just like, if it was revealed that they like CGI'd Ben Affleck's face onto Zack Snyder's body.
I would literally believe that more before I would believe that that's Ben Affleck.
I'm pretty sure
the entire movie Ben Affleck looks horrible.
I'm pretty sure they shot it in like a driveway during like lockdown, like total green. I mean, it looks like awful green screen.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's got that like awful like super fake looking sunset green screen too. Yeah, yeah, and Martian Manhunter looks awful.
Yeah,
like the design looks fine, but like
yeah,
it's the CG on it looks really
the entire
bad.
scene looks very half finished.
Yeah.
And
that's how the movie ends. That's the wonderful note that it ends on.
And to bring this full circle, I think the part that hurts the most is that for some reason, people are loving it. People are loving this. And now to each their own, you can enjoy whatever you want. But what I've seen overwhelmingly from fans online is that the Joker scene, the Martian Manhunter cameos, most of the film, people are just like, this is so great. It's so much better. I love the fan service. And that is something that I'm going to get hate for, I'm sure. But I will never understand this blind acceptance of every ounce of fan service that you possibly can get.
It's kind of weird because like, I don't know. I just remember the general conversations around Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman being like fairly negative, especially Batman vs. Superman. I mean, I still am a huge champion of the fact that that's one of the worst comic book movies to come out in recent memory. And then there's this weird shift now that his like vision of the DC extended universe is sort of just trashed. Mm-hmm. That like he was some like author with an incredible vision and just wasn't like people didn't let him do his thing. Mm-hmm. And like this is some like amazing like Zack Snyder riding on his white horse to save like comic book movies. And I'm just like, where did this come from? Like I always remember, I know that Zack Snyder's always had like a very dedicated fan base. And that's fine. Like people like his style and all that, but it's like, it seems to have overtaken the conversation. I wonder if like the people that like spent so long criticizing Zack Snyder movies just got tired and stopped talking about it. And all the people that love it got really amped up.
I think it really got amped up after like around the Snyder Cut time, because I mean, it's the general reception when the Snyder Cut was announced to be actually coming was kind of like we finally did it. We finally got it. And so, and I mean, I don't want to undercut that Snyder has fans. Clearly he grew a fan base. I would consider myself a fan of his work. And they banded together and they were really loud for as long as they possibly could. And they got an unprecedented film to be made. So hats off to that.
Yeah, that's cool. And I like, he seems like a really nice guy from all I can tell. And I think he's talented in a lot of aspects. He really just like his approach to things is just always wrong to me. Like when he made Sucker Punch and it was like supposed to be this feminist action movie that's just full of upskirt shots. It's like there's always this weird contradictory approach to things. Like all his comic book movies are like super like overly pretentiously dark and grim and feel like they're supposed to be gritty and realistic, but they're also just like overly dumb. And like the fact that they're overly serious makes them feel even dumber than they are. It's like he's like a director of really dumb movies who like really, really wants them to be intelligent movies. And it constantly feels contradictory. And it's the same thing in this one. Like, it just feels like the way he approaches it feels at odds with the material that he's working with.
I think that Snyder is at his best when he's working with both his unique vision in a smaller, condensed setting, like 300, where he's taking
maybe
one
a
story.
little bit of oversight too.
Yeah, but like I want him to take one story and work with it and do his stylization. I think it's better when he makes his stylization a gimmick. I know that's something we would normally advise against, but 300 is an entirely gimmick driven movie, but it works.
Yeah. It's like he approaches stuff with this very like 14-year-old fanboy feeling, or 14-year-old fanboy like sensibility, which just, it feels like it never quite works when he has to handle like weightier subject matter. But it's like he always wants to handle weightier subject matter. Like the sort of fanboy approach that he takes to Watchmen, just it doesn't work when there's like an almost rape scene, and he like doesn't seem to know how to handle it in a way that pulls it off believably and doesn't just feel like it's in bad taste. Hot take though, his best movie, the only movie of his that I will say like I genuinely like, is Legends of the Guardians, Owls of Ga'Hoole. It's an animated owl movie. It seems like nobody's seen it. Yeah. It's actually a pretty good movie.
I've seen that, yeah.
And I mean, he directed it, and it's like the best elements of his style, and it's actually a good movie. It's really good. Right. I think it's his best movie.
But yeah, oh man, Justice League.
Yeah,
we've been here for a while. I feel like I could go on.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot to unpack. I hope we've unpacked some of it. I think it would take a good 2 to 3 hours to really unpack the movie from start to finish. You could go a lot deeper, but I don't think we should. I don't think we should go any deeper. If you're not convinced by now, everybody has differing opinions. Hello, Snyder fans. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, leave a like, comment, tell us your opinion. Drop us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever your podcast provider is, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We have podcasts coming out every single week, and we will talk to you guys in the next episode.